afternoon, guys. I'll try to make this as interactive as possible, so if you guys have any questions, please just jet out and let me know. I'm not going to stand all the way there because I feel like really far away from you guys. So again, just jump out, any questions at all. I'm going to try, I don't know all of your background, but I'll touch on everything from customer discovery to customer acquisition, digital acquisition, e-commerce, funnel analysis, hardware, anything you guys really want to drill into, I'm happy to go a little deeper. I'm also happy to spend time with you afterwards. If you need templates, if you need introductions to suppliers, whatever you guys want, happy to kind of help out wherever I can with you guys. Just a little bit of background. This is my disclaimer slide that I always put in. This is Cartman's 4 steps of startup success. In all honesty, I'm between 2 and 3. So, you know, don't take everything I say as gospel. Definitely take everything as a grain of salt. I can share with you my experiences and what I've learned thus far. That doesn't mean that everything I've said is going to be applicable to your business or something you should exactly do. Maybe just think of what I said as inspiration and where I can be tactically helpful or in a strategic area. Please do let me know. But I'm not going to sit here and preach to you because, again, once I get to bro down, maybe we'll have a more of a lengthy chat. So a little background about my business and my genesis story. I think like all good startups come from a real pain. And we think about a pain that needs to be solved with, many times we talk about morphine or vitamins. What type of product or business are you building? Is it a problem that's so severe it needs morphine? Or is it okay that just it's okay to be treated with vitamins? In my case, it was a problem that was so severe, metaphorically speaking, it was treated with morphine. Although after this, you'll see maybe why, maybe not metaphorically, but I went downtown Chicago with my family in the summer of 2015, and this is Maggie Daley Park for those that are familiar with the city. Huge, amazing park. Parents will many times tell you it's a parent's nightmare and a kid's dream. And this is on a calm day. On the day I was there, it was probably 5 times as busy as this. There's really no gates around this park. For whatever reason, we thought it'd be a good idea to split up, and I would take my son, and my wife would take my daughter. Won't do that again. And I'm not really sure how I got distracted or what happened, but my son was on the right pillar there, and you can barely kind of see through it. From far away, you can't really see through it at all, and as you approach it, it's completely opaque. And I quickly lost sight of him in this huge mess of people. I climbed up in there, yelled, screamed, ran across the left side, up and down, all around, couldn't find him, screaming, yelling, started recruiting some other parents, explained what he looked like. They started looking for him, we're all yelling for him, we're all running around. And that's all within like 5 to 10 minutes. 20 minutes goes by, 25 minutes go by, and you still can't find your child. You start kind of going everywhere. You start thinking the worst things, even though logic tells you differently. And after half an hour, finally, he did find me, and this is the picture from the day. You can see he's wearing a Green Bay Packers hat in downtown Chicago, so I'm even more nervous at this point in time. But he found me. He was just out having a good time, being a kid, doing what kids do. And I came back from this pretty traumatized because as you go through this as a parent, you really feel like you have lost them forever during that time. And it sounds crazy to say, but you felt that way. And so when they come back and you find them, it's this huge relief that has impact on you. And so I went out and bought every single type of kid tracker you could possibly get your hands on. And these are the reactions of my kids when I try to put these big Dick Tracy watches on them. Bought tiles, I stapled them on them, all the things you could possibly think of. They're all terrible for various reasons. I won't go into elaborate length talking about how terrible they all were, but it gave me this inspiration that there was something better to be done, and something significantly better. And I probably could do something based on what I was, kind of my skills, the people I knew, the engineering I knew, the business skills I had, to solve this problem in a much more meaningful way. And so, like probably all good entrepreneurs, you just start talking to people. And so you start asking them, like, I got this idea, what do you think? So I start talking to my families and family. Of course, they'll tell you that your ideas are great. Your mom tells you it's great. Don't talk to your mom. You want people to really drill in to tell you why your business idea is terrible. and to call your baby ugly, right? Like, don't surround yourself with people that give you a reinforcement that's positive, although constructive. And so, after talking to a bunch of people, I kind of the quick sense check, yes, parents had the same problem that I talked to in my community. Then started talking to more people in Chicago. Then I went out and just started recruiting people through Facebook to talk to, just random people, because I really wanted to hear from them. One trick I did, have you ever heard of the tool Yammer? It's kind of like a Facebook for businesses. So what I did was I used Yammer and I recruited them, and I just, instead of doing like a focus group, let's just tell you what they want to hear, right? Especially if you're in person. If you put some sort of digital medium between you, they tend to open up and tell you really what they feel. Because one, you don't get reinforcement from other people. They kind of don't know what the kind of the sense is across the room. And there is an element of anonymity that they can kind of say whatever. So they kind of started talking about the problems they were having, and I kind of quickly identified that this wasn't just a problem that I was having. This was a problem that was generally shared with lots of parents, and you kind of see some of the words they use. Again, they're identifying this as like a morphine problem. I held them so tight it made me cry. Like you're evoking some massive emotion here. And then also found out that parents were generally not happy with the current products in the market. So started again kind of qualitatively with all of this, and then over time tried to quantify that. So I did go spend a couple $1,000 to go hire an agency to go do, or an agency, 2 people, to go do some kind of quantitative analysis on this, to do a bigger sample size. So find 1,000 people, try to quantify how severe this pain is. But kind of started getting that initial reaction that there was onto something. And in my case, there's no surprise, lots of kids, so big market. And again, on the quantified piece of it, we found out that over 50% of parents actually shared a similar experience. So this wasn't a problem that was identified with a small group of people. This is a problem that was identified with a very, very large group of a decent-sized market. And sometimes you have a novel idea, and that idea has maybe been there before. So the idea of tracking kids is not a new concept, although technology has evolved to a place where we can actually do something more interesting with it. And we can solve some major pain points that were previously identified with old products. But also sometimes the market comes together at the right time. So in this case, we had a market where you can track really everything in the crib. Everything from how often your baby poops, to the breathing in the middle of the night. So the next generation parent very well primed for this, but once they leave the crib, you really lose all traceability and tracking capabilities. We also started thinking about share of wallet. So great, people identify with a problem, but there's lots of problems in their lives. There's lots of things they may buy. How does your problem stack up with all the other things that they're thinking about? So in this case, we looked at parents and the types of products they were likely to buy in connected products. So for those that can't read, these are attitudinal statements that we built and randomly generated, not said that we were part of this. So everything from I'm willing to learn more about new technologies and help my children and grandchildren be safe. When it comes to safety and security of my children, wearable devices are something I definitely invest in. Smart security systems are great investments in safety for my home. Smart home appliances are great investments in energy and efficiency for my home. And wearable fitness devices are great investments for keeping me healthy. And so we look at how people feel attitudinally across these. Again, not looking at how you feel about a product. We're trying to identify a problem statement and a category. On the bars to the right, completely agree is in purple, and blue is completely disagree. And you're looking for themes here, and probably no surprise, wearable fitness devices end up in people's nightstands after 30 days. It shows up pretty low. I would call this a vitamin. As you go up, you start getting closer to morphines. And so, no surprise, what we're seeing in the industry is the smart security system. Why did Nest buy Dropcam? They started realizing these things. So this is additional kind of input that we gave ourselves, and I did before I was ready to take the leap. Maybe unlike many of you or some of you, I had been working for a very long time. I had a very nice salary. I had a mortgage. I had kids. And so for me to just stop all of that and not take a salary anymore and just give up my kind of nice, cushy corporate job, I wanted to make sure I was going to jump into something that could really embrace. There's a real market opportunity for us. So this was some of the things I did. So we built Jiobit. Jiobit, for those that aren't aware of the company or the product, very small, longest lasting location product to track really anything. We're starting with children, but you'll see why we've expanded that to other things as well. It's really, at its core, a smartphone that's the size of a couple quarters. So it has all of the same really architecture sensors that's in a really expensive iPhone, and something super small that allows us to do some really interesting things with contextual awareness and location. But I'm not really here to talk about my business or my product per se, but kind of how I think about things and how I can be helpful. The one thing that we thought about early on, is anyone familiar with the Jobs We Done framework? So, great. If you can look up Jobs We Done framework, there's a great Harvard Business Review on it. And the idea is you're building a product, and really that product is doing a job. And a customer is hiring you to do a job for them. They're hiring your product. Your job is to figure out what job you're really doing. So the job I'm doing is not to track your kids. That's the thing it does, but I'm being hired to really relieve stress. That's really what a parent is hiring me to do, is relieve stress. In that way, I think about competitors potentially differently. Like, I don't necessarily think this is my competitor, but if you think of that way, it could be alcohol. It could be marijuana. Like, these are things that people hire to solve that same problem. Probably not very, they're not really getting much from that, other than just burying that. This is a different way, but think of that way about what job are you really being hired to do. And when you think of that way, you may approach your design differently. Certainly we did. So in this case, we built some of our design very much kind of storytelling. So it wasn't necessarily, where are you this exact second? But we saw nannies writing down when they came home, this is all the things we did and all the places we went to every day. They just had a list, a notebook list of all of this. And so we just tried to replicate that exact list. And it was not so much where they were, but reducing some guilt that the mom had because she was a working mom and she couldn't be there every day. And she had this guilt of kind of what was going on, and she was curious about it. We also see this manifest itself, this guilt. Nanny cams, same thing. They check in because they feel guilty potentially about being gone. Question?
You just made a huge jump. You started out with, I am worried about where my kid is in this park right now.
Yep.
And suddenly you targeted an upscale market rather than the millions of parents that are out there, some of whom have very limited means.
Yep.
What happened?
Yeah. So the problem is still there. And you're trying to tap into a higher level kind of thing here, right? So there's always so many people that have had, again, still my problem, 50% of that market size. It's not billions and billions of people, but you talk about people that feel anxious, have worry. It's a much larger percentage of people. I can sell potentially that product to that particular problem statement, even if they haven't lost their kid yet, because they can identify with that anxiety. There are larger applications for this down the road, and probably like many of your technologies or products, you probably thought something similar where you have a really great true north, and as you start building it, lots of other opportunities start emerging. This is certainly true for us. However, you do have this kind of trade-off of how much do I decide to look at some of these other markets? How much is that not kind of distracting to my main focus? Can I pick up some of these without really doing too much? Can I really just resell and repackage what I have? And so it's a challenge for all of us. It's a challenge for me because some of these are really interesting markets. So it's also trying to understand before I commit, what type of resource requirements would be needed, how distracting could it be, and explore them very quickly. One thing that we did is we started getting a lot of inbound interest across lots of different markets, mostly on the B2B side. They just found it through consumer because they read blogs. And the very just kind of quick filter that we put was, hey, are you willing to prepay for 10,000 units? Yes or no? And that pretty quickly separated, kind of metaphorically, the men from the boys. And it helped you weed out. So just think about, are there ways that you can quickly build filters to put out there, because otherwise you'll end up talking with United Airlines for 6 months and get a PO for 20 units, or something like this. And that's what you want to avoid. You want something that's really meaningful. And if someone's willing to sign up for 10,000 units, well, shit, like that's millions of dollars of revenue for me in terms of probably $1 million of recurring revenue annually, plus maybe $1 to $2 million just in hardware sales. So in that case, I'm going to listen and I'm going to think about that. And if I can try to steer them towards a platform solution, that's the way I'm going to go. But I also have ways where we've done this where we just keep on talking forever and ever and ever, and then we do a pilot, and then after the pilot, then maybe they'll buy something, and holy cow. So what we've done is we've arranged everything as, instead of calling them pilots, it's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And you really map out all of those, and if you make these successful milestones, phase 3 is a purchase order for 20,000 units, or whatever it's going to be. But if you enter into pilots, they can typically just go forever and never really have any sort of meaningful outcome for you as a business. So just think about that. How can you structure these things, and how can you time box them? So we've done the same thing. We give them a letter of intent that they have to sign within 2 weeks. And if they can't sign that in 2 weeks, we stop engaging. And we say very clearly, this letter of intent is about a 3-phase project. If you decide to move forward on phase 1, it has an advanced purchase order of 10,000 units. So there's no surprises. They understand what they're getting into. They have 14 days to sign that. Then they have 14 days to use our product and to do a technical evaluation. After that 14 days, they have to ship back that product. They have to give us at least a $5,000 security deposit for that period of time, which we will refund after we get our product back. So for software, these are different things. But again, think about how you can time box them. How can you structure things that move it forward instead of just constantly in this evaluation stage forever and ever and ever. As we started thinking about our product in our business, and we launched pre-orders, which is a great way to get customer feedback. Question?
Sorry. On the time boxing and sending your product off with a security deposit, how do you protect that somebody isn't trying to reverse engineer your product? Do you have any sort of
great question.
there?
And so something we worried a lot about. And some of these people, we try as much as we can. So far in every case, we've been able through our network to verify them through recommendations. So we spent, during that letter of intent, 14 days on our side doing research on that person or people in the company to try to find personal recommendations back to an engineer or the person leading that program. In all the cases so far, we've been able to verify that they're like legit dudes or whoever, like they're not going to steal. Well, they shouldn't be, but you also still have, there's nefarious things people do. So in that case, in our agreement, in our prototype agreement, we put in there if there's any tampering, we can detect tampering. So we glue the thing tight, and in there we can detect any sort of tampering where they try to pry it open. If that happens, they have a clause where we can go ahead and charge the credit card we have on file $20,000. So there's meat to it. Now keep in mind, we've already charged the credit card. We already have tokenized it because we took a security deposit of $5,000. And then since I have that tokenized already, I would just go charge another $15,000 on the credit card I already have tokenized. It's a worry, it's a risk.
Yeah.
We try to mitigate that risk. We try to build some contractual teeth into it. If you don't, what we thought about this is, well, it's gonna be really hard to go after somebody if they did it. And this is why we did the security deposit, because we would just sit there and click a button and bam, $15,000. We also did an off on the charge card beforehand to make sure they had authorization up to $20,000. So they have to give us a credit card that had a limit over $20,000. Now, of course, they could like close the account. They could like at least it was better than just like suing them and maybe never getting paid back. As we went into this market, we launched pre-orders. Great way to get some customer feedback. Great way to start testing your e-commerce platform, your purchase funnel, all sorts of things we'll talk about in a bit. But one thing we noticed right away was that customers started live chatting us. We have a live chat on our website. We also have a customer service number. We spoke with a couple companies that said, hey, just put a phone number on there. People won't call it all the time, but they'll just feel better about the purchase. The fact they can talk to a human, they'll call you. So we had a lot of calls, a lot of live chats, and people asking, could I just buy this for my dog? And we'd always thought about this in the back of our minds. We designed the product to be modular and flexible, And so we thought about this use case, we just didn't think we'd go there so quickly. But when you think about it, and as you're talking to more and more of these customers, the first child they have is their fur baby. And then that's kind of their practice. And then they have kids. So if you think about building a customer for life, it's the same customer. We just got them a few years earlier before they had kids. And so we started thinking, hey, if we're going to build this customer for life, if we want to get the right side, we may actually have to start first on the left side. Which, surprisingly or not surprisingly, people will spend a shit ton of money on their pets, many times more than their kids, and sometimes treat them better as well. So in our case, kind of going from 0 to 1, we didn't have the first mover advantage. Peter Thiel in his book kind of talks about this last mover advantage of sometimes you're allowed to look at the competition, who's out there and where they failed, why they failed. And so Apple wasn't the first smartphone, obviously. Nest wasn't the first smart thermostat. So you can look at these areas and then realize where I could potentially bring a product to life that can disrupt that area and learn from their failures. Start small and dominating a small niche. He also talks about this. So in our case, we're very, very focused on kids and pets. In the future, we may decide to expand from that, but our focus is really those two markets and keeping super focused on those. And then thinking about 10x improvements, instead of just thinking about if I'm 20% better, 30% better, 50% better, can your product do 5x, 6x, and whatever it is that metric that you're able to do 6, 10x of, is that a metric that people care about? In the case of pets, or in our case, we could validate some of those things pretty quickly by talking to partners in that space. So we spoke with Purina. Purina has spoken with just about every type of tech product for pets you can imagine. And we asked them, like, hey, before we go into this market, we're thinking about pets, but like, we think we have a better product. What do you guys think? And they said, the biggest issue that we have in this market, why we haven't, as Purina, invested or purchased a company, even though their competition had Mars Pet Care, bought our competitor, Whistle, for $117 million. And so the reason why we haven't, and why we have done a partner, is that battery life is atrocious even on that product. And why does that matter? Because no one wants to charge something on their pet's collar every 3 days. Every 30 days? Every 2 months? Okay, we're talking. But every 3 days? No. So that's why we haven't invested. So great, I have a 10x improvement there of a meaningful metric that I can talk to somebody that's done the validation for me. Sometimes people ask me, like, how do I think about research and how do I think about kind of validation of a market? In software, it's different, right? You just go build a product and you throw it out there. In hardware, it's a little bit different. You have some pretty big capital investments in hardware. The number of resources typically are larger. You have more specialty people, electrical engineers. There's no such thing necessarily as a full stack engineer in hardware. You have electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, industrial designer, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to make certain as much as you possibly can that what you're doing is going to have a big market behind it and valuable, people love it. So in my case, I had spoken to a lot of this. We started very early, which is kind of the qualitative research. So we found out there's lots of interest in space, lots of anxiety, wanting to give kids freedom. November, December, we increased that to quantitative. So now we're starting to identify, willingness to pay, like what types. Are we talking about $1? Are we talking about $30? When you ask people to do this, though, you have to be careful because people they're not voting with their wallet at that point in time. It's very easy to be like, oh yeah, I pay for this thing. So later on, what we did, we tried to get a vector. Like, is this a $1 thing or is this a $30 thing? I'm not going to trust too much. It's $25, $3.99. Just tell me, is this like not a lot or like reasonable? And what we did here is that we launched a beta test and we made people pay for it. And when we made people pay for it, we changed the pricing. Every person got a different price. And so we could kind of do a simulation of price sensitivity before we launched our product, just by looking at beta testers. So if beta testers weren't willing to pay this, then certainly a normal customer wouldn't, and we could see that big drop. But it also tells you some areas maybe where you might be leaving money on the table. Now, word of caution there, these are many times like the most involved customers, like they want to beta test it. So take it with a grain of salt. But you're trying to find something, you're trying to, anything you can as a proxy to simulate some of this information. And that was for us a fairly good proxy. When we launched the product, And we didn't, in our case, see any meaningful change in conversion between $99 and $129. And when we went lower than that to $79, it was about the same as $99. So in our case, it was the same. However, I do think our right goalpost is different in the beta. I think the beta testers would have paid a lot more, and I don't think real customers were. So I don't want to go too much further than that. But again, just a way that I tried to simulate that as an idea. The other thing we did is we created fake ads on Facebook for a product that didn't exist yet. And that helped us identify and recruit people. So we get their email address, we sign up for beta. We can also start prototyping and testing very early copy, creative, value proposition statements. And you can just look at your click-through rates as an A/B. So, okay, if I position it this way versus this way versus this way, and look at your CPC on all of that, it just gives you some insights into how to position the product. How big of a problem is this? And if you can get people to click through and engage with your website for 20 cents, it's pretty damn good. And you can do that before you even have a product. And then moving into like actual like prototyping, putting it into homes, we did probably 10 families every kind of couple of weeks. So we put it in the homes of 10 families. We'd have them videotape themselves, not just the parents, but the kids as well. And kind of have the whole family together talking about the product in their lifestyle, in their home. We'd send researchers into the home, just kind of researchers, I should be clear, just our team members. We didn't have any like specific researcher. And so we just watched them use the product. In this case, we found out that, it's no surprise for both homes, we found that their kitchen counters, which is where they charge all their crap, was pretty cluttered. And they had a lot of places where they had like a mud room or a laundry room. This is like where they go to the garage, or they go in and out every day. So you watch the kids, they're going through this door. This is where they go to school every single day. That's where they have all the things where they need to remember. That's where their book bags are. That's where their lunchbox is. That's what they remember when they go out the door to bring it with. And so, but there's no counter spaces. So we thought, well, this would be a great place to have the product kind of live, because it reminds them every time I leave the house, bam, there it is. So we need to have it wall mounted for charging. So this is an insight that we had by just kind of observing people. And then there's this kind of, everyone know what this is? Yeah, question.
From outside, do you do all the market research, all that paid study by yourself, or work with marketing agencies?
Great question. So we didn't have a lot of money at the time. So like rewind back late 2015 when we started this, we didn't have a ton of money. So it was go out and create a Facebook ad, a fake Facebook ad, and try to recruit people. I had some friends that I hired for a couple $1,000s, like really quick, dirty, and cheap as much as you can. And then as we started making more progress and we needed to kind of substantiate some bigger qualitative or quantitative numbers like investors, that's when we went and spent a little bit more money, but not that much. And then we went to universities like here or other places. In our case, we used Northwestern, and we partnered with MBA classes that are just desperate to do projects that are real. And so we partnered with Northwestern, 2 different programs, and we gave them this problem statement and said, hey, here's the problem statement. Which market segments are the best kind of to target for this? And what about the. And they just kind of took it and ran with it, and we could get some really cheap research that way. Yeah. So, field of dreams. If you build it, they'll come, or maybe not. And so, reason why I bring this up is what I learned from being in a big company was a lot of times it was really great technology, really great product, just go build it, just go. Marketing was never brought in until like the very end. You only thought about the product and the tech very many times. And so marketing was this afterthought. The conventional wisdom at that company was just making money off of hardware, which we all know is a road to nowhere. There was no control over the customer, very much siloed, unclear customer user focus. But this is a really great kind of way, I think, to think about things, of trying to think about beyond just the offering. So beyond just the product performance, and the product system, and the service, but are there other areas of your business that allow you to meaningfully differentiate? So the business model, so in this case, not just hardware. Networking, how can you potentially take advantage of the value chain through partnerships? Like I mentioned, maybe even with Arena, help us accelerate faster. In our case, we did not just use Kickstarter. Thinking about customer experience, what are those magic moments with your product that bring smiles to people that are going to be remembered when they maybe unbox the product or power it on for the first time or use the software for the first time. Other things around maybe even support and service. So service, assistance provided to different customers. Owlet, I think, does a really great job with this. They hire moms, stay-at-home moms, to do customer service for them. Not only is that pretty effective from a cost perspective, but it gives them super credibility because their main buyer is moms. They're sitting there and they're live chatting with moms. So there's different ways to think about your business beyond just beyond the product offering. In our case, we have a service and a hardware revenue model. We certainly take advantage of other companies' strengths through partnerships and structuring talent. So in our case, we had to refine this many times, but we had to think about how we could hire people effectively and what are the indicators of maybe a good employee. One thing we struggled with early on was we just hired only on skill. So was this engineer really great for this thing? And it took us 2 or 3 people to not work out to realize we needed to prioritize more like a culture fit. Like, was this person properly motivated? And we developed a test for this. I don't know if this is legal, so be careful on what I'm about to say. But what we did was we gave them 3 offers. And we said, when we were getting to the point where we might be interested in them, we said, offer 1 is a really great salary. Like really high. By the way, I could never afford to pay them that, so it was like the false offer. Really great salary. And no equity in the company. Middle option was like a under market salary, but like pretty good equity. And then the other offer was like very little money and a whole lot of equity. And I wanted to see how they would react with these 3. And what we realized is that the 2 or 3 people that didn't work out all picked the high salary option back when we were talking about compensation. And then moving forward, we built this test, and we never hired anyone moving forward that picked that left box. Only the people that picked the other 2. And we haven't had necessarily a problem since. So we try to align those incentives. We also try early on to kind of define what our culture is. What does working here mean? What is you can't dictate what culture should be. Kind of the people that you have working there need to define that. So we spent some time kind of like, what defines us? What defines the type of people that work here? In our case, it was a lot of tinkerers. It's something we valued, we loved. All of us kind of love to tinker and play. And so we made that like a requirement. So now when we hire somebody, that has to be in their DNA, that they like to tinker. That could be anyone. That could be an engineer, that could be a marketer, like something they go out and play with and tinker and experiment with. That could be that they go out and do science projects with their daughter or their son. Like, that's fine, but we try to find people like that. So just examples to try to define what your culture is, hire for that just versus skill. Couple of things around acquisition, customer acquisition. I mentioned kind of building fake ads. I mean, they're really real ads, but you don't have anything to sell them quite yet. So in our case, these were ads about getting an email, so our metric. So what did we use to try to define this? It was how can we get an email address from the user? And we felt that if we could get their email, that was enough of a commitment, that KPI was something that we could measure, not just clicks. Clicks for us, we didn't feel was meaningful enough. It needed to be a bigger commitment. And so we started early on. On the left side, this is the cost of an email. What you don't see is before July 15th, it was over $40. So we started at $40. It's fine. You don't know what the hell you're doing. And you start experimenting, you start playing. You start playing with audiences, you start playing with creative, you start playing with copy, value proposition. And we see this get down to 12. Cool. 40 to 12. All we did was just really put creative there that looked somewhat professional. But then we go from $12 to $3. And the big breakthrough on this was being extremely pointy to the point of potentially being uncomfortable. So being very, very clear what your product does and not being afraid to offend some people with that statement. So back when it was $12, we were this very much kumbaya type of statement, like, oh, we're the product that helps you relieve some stress and like let your kid explore. It wasn't like offensive, but it wasn't like morphine. It seemed kind of like vitamin. And then we made a creative where a mom and a daughter were in tears embracing at Walmart. It says, never lose your kid again. And that was it. And that was the breakthrough. So for us, it was being very, very pointy. And the comments, thousands of comments on this ad. And there's a lot of really bad ones. So there were moms that were like, you are a bad parent. How can you just like let technology like not look at you're missing the point. But this is the type of comments you get, people that were like parent shaming. They were like, they thought technology was a way for you to like ignore your children. And this was gonna somehow be your parent for you or something. And then you see other parents on there like, I have 4 kids, are you kidding me? Like, I will take any help I can get. I will take any set of extra eyes I can get my hands on. And so we started picking up from this other ideas on creative and copy. We just started using the words they were using. So this lady said, I could use an extra set of eyes. And so we added that back into a campaign, and we started seeing that perform really well. Value proposition, message, feeling, like immediate reaction. And then the right side is get them to the website and then engage with them there. And so same tactics. As soon as we started realizing what was working in Facebook, we started implementing it on the website itself. We started seeing engagement go higher and people signing up for more emails. This is an example of some of the ones that we used. I don't think this is the exact one that we got the big breakthrough on. But you'll see these all at like a glance look very, very similar. But some very important differences. So has your child ever wandered off or gotten lost? It's kind of this like, you're not making a statement, you're just kind of asking this question. And then you go into, it only takes a minute for them to get lost. And then you go into, it only takes a minute for them to get lost, and then a subcopy. So you'll see very small changes between these, but somewhat like major impacts in terms of overall CPA. So you just never know what's gonna work for your business. You just have to experiment the shit out of this and change up your creative, change your subcopy. I mean, look at these ones on the right. There's a 45-cent difference between these. The only change is the copy below the image. Like, it's pretty interesting. Then we also started looking at ways to try to simulate cost of acquisition. So this is something that you're trying to build your business model, you're going to start thinking about, but if you're not selling your product yet, how do you know what the cost of acquisition is? So what we did was we knew what our cost of an email was. Kind of showed that already. So I can pay this much for an email, and then it's how many of those people would potentially convert from an email to buying the product. So again, when I used that beta test, what we did is we sent a beta test out to people and measured that conversion. And then we said, roughly, we were probably wrong by like quite a bit. So we came up with this $25 CAC by kind of simulating these things out. And it was better than a guess, right? Like, it's wrong, but we know it's probably not $2, and we know it's probably not $100. So we're trying to narrow this down and build our business model around this, because if my cost of acquisition is going to be $200, I don't have a business. And if it's $2, it's wonderful. So this is right now our CAC. We're still in pre-orders. So it was $25. That was what we kind of estimated. We're at like 44, right? So we're in the grand scheme of things, like we're pretty close. And we're still on pre-orders, meaning we believe, and other companies have also proven this, as you start steady shipping the product, your CAC comes down because you have network effects, people actually talk about your product, you can have media influencers that actually will write about your product. And also there's a number of people, again, through live chats, we figured this out, that just want to buy the product right now because they have that problem statement they came across, like me at the Torque. And so we've lost those people because they needed a problem, like they needed to solve it right this second. That's not a huge amount of people, but that CAC will come down. So my point being is that using a methodology like this gets you somewhat close. It's not going to be perfect and maybe put in a bigger margin of error than I did, but it can help you to start estimating and projecting maybe what your CAC could be. It also gives you a good goal. Going back, the other thing that we noticed was we built this in like a 3-week rolling CAC. So we would take the money that we spent over 3 weeks, and average that in, because there's a cycle of just kind of investigating the product, awareness. They're just not going to buy it right that second. And so we have it as a 3-week rolling. We look at our spend for 3 weeks, and then we say, okay, we take that divided by the orders, and then we also back out any major campaigns that were like free. So Fatherly they've got 3 million followers on Facebook. They, unbeknownst to us, we didn't pay for it, we didn't ask it, we didn't even know about it, ran a video about Jiobit, and had like 300,000 views in the video, was shared 10,000 times. Got a bunch of orders. I can't show that in my CAC. That's like not sustainable. Like I can't guarantee or bank on a Fatherly video happening. The same thing with like people that sign up for our emails now on our website. We actually back that out. We know that at scale that will help us, but like right now, I just want to prove that without organic and without these like unanticipated things, going out and me spending money and finding customers, this is what it would look like to a VC. Because they just want to see, like, are you just selling this to a bunch of like friends and family, or are you really out there like finding people at somewhat scale? And so what we then do is we just every week we start spending a little bit more money, a little bit more money, and a little bit more money to try to prove that that's becoming scalable, that that's not just a one-time spike up. For those that are interested in digital marketing, the one thing that you're going to find with both Facebook and AdWords is you may try to like throw a bunch of money at it, like spend your whole week's budget in one day, and it'll actually yield worse results. Their algorithms end up taking time to kind of learn, and so instead of spending a whole week's budget one day, just slowly ratchet up by like 20 bucks a day, or 10 bucks a day, or 5 bucks a day, just slowly, and you'll see the CAC keep the same. We did an experiment where we threw a whole week's budget one day, and it went up to like $150 CAC. Like it just didn't work. The algorithms just don't react that fast. So just be slow and steady with it to try to prove it out. Funnel analysis, same type of thing. Think through your metrics and your goals. Think through exit rates. Think through, in our case, we built our website in the beginning that just didn't have really a product page. It was really just a really long scrollable homepage. And the thought, the hypothesis was they made up their mind just by doing it. They never engaged any further to know any more about the product. Now we did have a product page it was basically a product page, like a tech page, but it just wasn't no one ever went to it. And so what we did is we implemented a product page, and of course, the number of people that go to it shoots up, which is the green line, the number of people from home to product. But also the number of people that went from home all the way to the store drops. But you also notice that our overall conversion stayed about the same. So our hypothesis was wrong. Like it really didn't impact our business at all by going from like a really scrollable product in a homepage to building out into like a funnel. And then you'll see how like something like Fatherly will completely throw all your metrics out of whack. So like this on 10/15, this was Fatherly for like an hour. And so it's like, whoa, we gotta back all that out. So just try to think about those analytics in your mind and how to maybe back out some things, the type of metrics that you want to measure. Happy to talk more about all of this stuff. If you are a hardware company, come talk to me, send me an email, John@Jiobit. We can share all sorts of stuff with you in terms of like planning templates, business model templates, GM trackers, tons of advice that we can give you on supply chain procurement, different partners to be looking at for tools, and that's pretty much where I'll stop and just kind of open up for like general questions. Again, it's kind of like a smorgasbord of things, but without knowing everyone's background, I kind of have a bit of everything in there. So happy to take any questions and where I can be helpful to anybody.